And I think that all indications are that that this bill is starting to come due. There are municipalities in the country where it's estimated as much as 60% of water is lost. There have been severe problems with the maintenance of basic infrastructure, pipes, pump stations, etc. And all of this is being compounded by the electricity crisis.
Is South Africa on the brink of a water crisis? Joining me to discuss this issue, which maybe doesn't get enough attention given the load shedding that we're faced with on a day-to-day basis, is the project manager at the Institute of Race Relations, Mr. Terence Corrigan. Terence, thank you very much for being with us today. We're going to discuss one of your recent articles on the Daily Friend website, which I will link to in the description below. Let's just start off with the current state of play. What prompted you to write this article on the sort of water supply, water issues in South Africa at the moment? Was there anything in particular that jumped out to you in terms of statistics, maybe amount of lost water due to leakages, that sort of thing that prompted you to investigate this issue?
Well, the real spark for me was actually an article in the Citizen, a sort of a cover page that talked about South Africa's looming water crisis. Now, this is less looming than loomed and already here. There have been warnings about South Africa facing water shortages that go back to at least the 1980s. For those old enough to remember, there were times in the early 80s where South Africa was so severely hit by drought for such an extended period that taps in some parts of the country dried up. I remember growing up in northern KwaZulu-Natal. For a while, potable water was actually delivered by tankers. You got a little paper tag, and you had to go and collect it in a bucket or a container. During the transition period, there were already concerns being raised in cities like Johannesburg about the phenomenon of lost water. What had happened was that essentially that the investment in new infrastructure and the maintenance had been cut back. Over the next sort of 10 years, the focus was very much on expanding access to water, as was quite understandable, but the maintenance backlogs were never properly addressed. Now, as I said, in the 1990s, I remember reading a statistic that about 30% of water in Johannesburg was being lost. In other words, those are leaks, usually in underground pipes. That's a hell of a lot, particularly for a water-stressed society. A city like Johannesburg is not built on a major water fair. And that's something we also forget. South Africa is a water-stressed country, but also the siting of our cities is very unusual. About 2/3 of our water resources, I think our rainfall is in KwaZulu-Natal. That's the only part of the country where that where that sort of conventional water supply system is viable. We have to think much more creatively. And I think that all indications are that this bill is starting to come due. There are municipalities in the country where it's estimated as much as 60% of water is lost. There have been severe problems with the maintenance of basic infrastructure, pipes, pump stations, etc. And all of this is being compounded by the electricity crisis. In order to run your pumps and the bulk infrastructure, you need a power supply. And this isn't on firmly on the public agenda because the bill hasn't come due. But I think if we are pushed into that situation, the severity could well outstrip what we are now experiencing with our electricity.
Terence, in terms of locating maybe the sort of heart of the issues, as it were, is it solely at the Department of Water and Sanitation? Is it at the respective municipal or provincial departments of that sort of aspect of service delivery? Or do you think it's a mixture of this sort of stuff? Because you've got this this concept of infrastructure building and capacitating and sort of spending, as it were, to make sure that the basics are there. But where does the heart of this lie?
Look, it's a systemic problem. In part, it's society wide in the sense that the infrastructure or the ecosystem, if you like, of water engineering skills is shallow. Now, Anthony Turton raised this point about 15 years ago. He wrote a very interesting paper when he was at the CSIR, which I think ultimately got him sacked, warning about this. And one of the points that he made in that paper was that we face many of the same problems that a country like Australia does, but Australia has, has the innovation capacity to overcome its problems in a way that South Africa lacks. Departments have been problematic, the national departments, because there's been a great deal of ministerial turnover, shifting priorities. Using this a bit like a ministerial football, the early ministers, the sort of Mandela and Mbeki era, Kota Osmal, for instance, they had a reasonably good handle on the issue, although also neglecting the critical maintenance, and I think also being very subsumed in the optics of it. Subsequently, there've been scandal after scandal, and Professor Mike Muller, who was a senior official at the department in the early days of democracy, has termed this a sort of case study in state destruction. That's serious. That's serious enough, and that's the level at which a lot of the sort of mass bulk supply reticulation, the funneling in water from Lesotho, etc., takes place. Getting it into your tap, you have to look at municipalities, and this is where the failure of local government, hits the individual and the individual's household very hard. As I say, a failure, for instance, to maintain a water supply infrastructure means that you can lose 60% of your water. A failure to employ people who have the skills to actually literally take the spanners and hammers to go and repair machinery when it breaks down. There've been cases where municipalities, and I'm talking quite sizable ones, simply didn't have an engineer on staff. No one who actually understood the technicalities, and you end up with a situation as in Lekwe municipality at Standerton, where Astral Foods literally had to get a court order to essentially take over the supply of water to their plant. They had, this is bring your own infrastructure. They were literally having to take water out, purify it, and then use it for the processing of chickens. That's a level of decline that just boggles the mind. But that is a reality. And as I say, without electricity, a modern society is not possible. Without water, no society is possible.
Thank you very much for watching. A reminder, please, before you leave, to like this video if you have not yet done so. Also, we invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We greatly appreciate your support and engagement and the sharing of our content across your various networks. Until next time, this has been Chris Hattingh for the Centre for Risk Analysis. Take care.